growth mindset is the number one thing I recruit for. And so I think what you've described is someone who demonstrates their ability to grow and learn and take risks and change. That's like one of the number one leadership skills.
Welcome to Promoted with Denise Harris, the podcast where ambitious professionals come to hear impactful conversations, game-changing tips, and learn the strategies that drive career advancement and help you get promoted. I'm your host, Denise Harris. Now, research indicates that office politics significantly impact women's careers and promotability, often to their detriment. Women face unique challenges in navigating workplace politics compared to their male counterparts. Our guest today is Brenda Barbour, and she's going to help us gain some insight on navigating internal politics. Brenda is a senior executive with over 25 years of experience leading and transforming diverse teams across a range of industries. Known for her leadership and vision, Brenda has a proven track record of driving organizational success in both the private and nonprofit sectors. Welcome, Brenda.
Thank you, Denise. I'm really excited to be here.
Oh, well, it's great to have you. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Sure.
How would you define internal politics? And why is it critical for career advancement, especially for women who are aiming for senior roles?
I'm going to define internal politics as one of the mechanisms that decision makers use to share information and negotiate decisions. And so that might not sound like what you expect because it's neutral. I think it can be used for good or it can be used for bad. But corporations and organizations, they're human systems. And so we have to recognize that people are always negotiating with others to make decisions. And so once you recognize that is what internal politics are, then you can stop complaining about it and get in the game. And so what I mean by that is if someone does a favor for someone that's undeserved in a corporation because it's someone they liked, that's bad. That shouldn't happen. But at the same time, if I know an extremely qualified candidate and I let the hiring manager know about that person because I think that they would be good for a role, that could be called internal politics, but it's good for the corporation, it's good for the hiring manager, and it's good for the candidate. Now, of course, they would have to go through the regular recruitment process. But again, if you look at the umbrella of internal politics, I think it's important for women to recognize that it exists, it's part of a human system, and how can I therefore use it for good and not for evil.
I would agree with you, Brenda. And I think it's interesting because, I'm a former corporate executive myself. And one of the things that I learned while I was in corporate for 20 plus years was that women who focus solely on job performance and avoid office politics may find themselves at a disadvantage. I think the reality is that political savvy is crucial for career progression, and especially in competitive work environments. There's no doubt about it. And I think the other thing, Brenda, is that by not engaging in office politics, women may lack critical information about workplace dynamics and a decision-making process that really would affect or could affect their careers.
Yeah.
How do perception, influence, and alliances shape those decisions, particularly at senior levels? And how can women navigate these dynamics a little bit more effectively?
Wow. Perception is everything. Okay. And so we all have perceptions of our coworkers. And if you are perceived as someone who is trustworthy, a source of reliable information, then when you say things, it will be more often taken at face value. It will less often be validated. And so I think the first thing to think about is we need to manage how we're perceived. because perception is so important and everybody's going to have a perception of you. So why not take time and think about, well, how do you want to be perceived? What are the things you want people to think about when they think of you? And what are the things you're doing intentionally to reinforce or affect that perception? So those are my thoughts on perceptions. And that leads into influence because we are more easily influenced by people we trust. Building authentic, trusted work relationships is critically important in your career success because it will affect not only your career, but your ability to get things done.
Yeah.
Your ability to be influential in the organization and to get things done. And so I think instead of focusing on sort of influence strategies, 10 ways to influence people, focus on building those trusted relationships, because then when you come with your credible proposals or whatever, you will be influential.
The reality is women often face biases that question their competence or their leadership potential. I think we know that. And there are sometimes assumptions that are being made about us that we are less assertive or capable in high pressure roles. So I get what you're saying, but what are your thoughts about that and how important is it for women to develop the leadership style that feels authentic to them? Because maybe that's what helps to lead to developing those relationships.
So there are always going to be people who are sort of in your corner, neutral, and against you, right? So accept that people are in those categories. And then the people who are in your corner, you can strengthen those. The people who are neutral, you can move them to in your corner. And the people who are against you, you have to decide whether that's a battle worth fighting or not. And I think that's important because sometimes we spend so much mental energy on the X% of people who we feel like are against us for whatever reason than the Y% where we would have our most influence. And so I think when I say build trusted relationships, it's your manager, it's your manager's manager, it's all your peers, it's your subordinates, but it's also people in other parts of the organization. Because wherever you are, you might not be the trusted person, but a person who you have a relationship with might be the trusted person for the person you're trying to influence. Yeah. And so to the extent that you have this network of people who trust you, they can also serve you.
I mean, essentially what I'm hearing is manage your stakeholders.
Yes.
It's not just managing the people that are right away within your circle, meaning your direct leader or the people who may be reporting into you, but also the external stakeholders, whether they are in the organization and also outside of the organization as well. I mean, I think that's a key component too.
Oh, it is. I remember when I was an engineer, one of the stakeholders that I really believe was the key to my first promotion was my external clients. So even though they were outside the corporation, they were the loudest voices about my technical abilities, my professionalism, my impact. And I think that had a lot to do with that very first promotion that I got. You never know where that stakeholder is going to come from. But I think for all women, you know, because it's different in different industries, you need to look around and assess who are the key stakeholders who influence the people I'm trying to influence, and then make sure that you have an effective relationship with those people.
Yeah, that is so important because your reputation, it precedes you. Yeah. I mean, people kind of know about you or know of you, not necessarily because you've told them, but because of what they hear and the circles that you're moving around in.
Can I tell you a story? This is just a bit of an aside, but I think it's interesting. I've changed my careers a couple of times, from engineer to communications, et cetera. And when I was in that in between, I was a freelance writer. And I was in this women's writing group in Bethesda where we would get together one Sunday a month. And there were poets, there were memoirists, there were technical writers. There's all kinds of writers in this group. And I was truly in that group to improve my writing and make some friends. That was the only objective. I was not networking. I was not thinking about networking. But it was from that group that one of the women said, "Oh, there's this job at the World Bank I think you would be excellent for." And that was my entry into a 15-year career at the World Bank. Wow. And so I think we often think of networking as, oh, there's this VP over here. Let me go ask him for coffee or ask her for coffee. And having been an executive and getting those requests all day, every day, it was kind of annoying. And so I think the more you can have authentic network building, and also if you're going to ask the VP over there for coffee, then have something to offer them.
Yeah.
Because they've got some initiative that you know something about that you want to discuss with them and contribute to their initiative. That's more valuable than just saying, can we have coffee? Because I want your advice on how to.
Yeah, I think that's so important. I mean, there has to be some reciprocity in it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I mean, even if it's kind of a mentor-mentee relationship, there is an exchange of just respect and caring, but also helping each other to move forward in your career. And I think that's the other piece around sponsorship as well. I mean, I spoke to Valencia McClure in our last episode. She's the president of PepGo, and she talked about the importance of having sponsors.
Oh, 100%. Sponsors and mentors. And so separate from my point about reciprocity when you're like reaching out to a VP, I do think mentors are important. And for mentors, yes, they're going to learn. It's going to be bi-directional, but I do think it's important I have had so many mentors who were in it to support me, to support my learning, to support my exposure. So I do think when we are leaders, when we reach the point of being leaders, it's important to be a giving and supportive mentor to more junior staff.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. And that sort of leads me into the next question that I have for you, because I've been thinking about this, and that is women having to balance being assertive and approachable while avoiding the pitfalls of the likability trap. Right. I mean, like I have so many clients that are very business focused. They are top leaders in their game, but there's just something a little edgy about them that for whatever the reason, they haven't knitted that likability factor. You know, like I hate to bring politics in it, but it's similar to like Hillary Clinton, right? I mean, listen, I mean, she's got politics in her DNA, no doubt about it, but the likability factor, not so much. What do you think about that? Does it matter? Does it help when you're trying to get promoted? I mean,
100%. I mean, so I don't like this, but I'm just stating from my experience, people like to work with people they like.
Yeah,
right.
Absolutely.
So of course, technical competence is the given, right? You got to have that. But I think the way I would describe it is to pay attention to who you're dealing with and to align your level of formality, the way you're showing up, of course, being authentic, but align it to who you're dealing with. So at the World Bank, I worked for one vice president, super casual, told me how her weekend was, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And it was a very informal relationship. Then I got a new VP who was much more formal. And so I didn't show up in our one-on-one meetings in the same way with that VP as I had with the previous one. And so I think this is not inauthentic to adjust the way you comport yourself and present yourself to who you're dealing with. It's not inauthentic. You still be your authentic self, but then, I'm speaking with a close colleague who I've worked with for years where we can cut up and joke around and have a good time. But I err on the side of professionalism, and I've been accused of being aggressive, but no, that's what I'm saying. I might be assertive, but it was called aggressive at the time, right? And so sometimes you're like, okay, that's what you think. Well, let me just keep getting up, So you cannot manage everything that people think about you, but I do think to the extent that you can pay attention to the corporate culture, be situationally aware, that will serve you.
Yeah, I think it's also part of emotional intelligence too, though, right? I mean, you have to be able to read the room. Sort of talking a little bit about what you mentioned earlier. Some leaders, some people within the organization want to know how your weekend was. How's everything going, right? Oh, listen, how's Bobby? Did he graduate yet? Or whatever. And others, not so much. And I think that is an important component of sort of getting to know people within the organization. And sometimes it's less about you constantly talking and more about you practicing active listening skills.
Yes. And also sometimes, again, depending on the situation, asking questions. I think it's okay when you have a new senior leader who you're going to be interacting with regularly to ask, do you want regular updates, or do you just want to hear from me when there's a risk or something that might bubble up to you, right? Different leaders want different things, just like different staff members want different things. So instead of assuming that this leader wants what I think a leader would want, sometimes when you have a new leader, you need to ask some questions so you can sort of define the standards, guardrails for how that relationship is going to work.
Yeah. I agree with you, Brenda. And it's interesting, though, because so many women in particular just keep their head down, want to get the work done, think they're doing a fabulous job, which I'm pretty sure they are.
It's not enough.
Not enough.
It's not enough.
And it's so
unfortunately, it's just not enough.
About this for years, right? Like, it's not so much about tooting your own horn or standing on a table with a bullhorn saying, I'm great. It isn't that, but there's got to be like somewhere in the middle where you are able to talk about what you want, right? What you've accomplished, what your contributions are to the bottom line. And at the same time, also understand what your leader needs.
Yes, exactly. Your leader's success is your success. I guarantee you, if you make your leader more successful, if you help them achieve the goals that they've set out, then that's going to serve you. That's just how corporations work, right?
Yeah, it's a game. That's just the reality. You have to figure out how to navigate on the playing field. And I think that sort of leads me into the importance of not limiting your network to your comfort zone. I think that when we get into the office place, we make friends, right? I mean, we build relationships with people who are like us. It's easy and it's natural. But instead, I think it's really important to build the relationships with colleagues across functions and levels.
Yes.
Particularly with those who can influence your career trajectory. How critical is it for women to be intentional about building their network, both inside of the organization, Brenda, but also outside?
It's critical because there are very few careers that progress within a vertical line of the organization, A, B, C, D, right? Your career is going to, even if you stay within the same corporation, it's going to go to different parts of the organization. So it's important for you to build a broad network. I'll give an example because I think this is an approach that a lot of women don't use, but can be quite useful. I worked in knowledge management. And I really cared about it and I studied it and I knew a lot about it. And a part of the organization that I did not work in was organizing knowledge days, knowledge sharing days. So I went to the director who was coordinating those and I was like, hey, here's what I know. Here's what I can do. Can I contribute to these days? And I ended up helping design and facilitating a couple of sessions for those knowledge days.
Yeah.
And maybe 9 months later, when that director had a managerial posting open, she reached out to me and told me to apply. She would not have heard of me had I not offered, outside of my regular job, my skills to contribute to those knowledge days. So call it cross support, call it stretch assignments, whatever you want. If there are things happening in your corporation that are interesting to you that you think you can contribute to, you still got to do your day job. You still got to deliver well on all of the responsibilities of your day job. But if you can go do something else for someone else, they know you, they know your skills. Now more people know who you are. It gives you more opportunity.
Yeah. I call that managing your career.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, that's what that is. It's really about managing your career. But, I think another piece of that is you got to get outside your comfort zone. Yeah. Like when you want to get promoted, when you want to get to that next level, you have to do things that you are uncomfortable, whether it's, to your point, going into another area of the business and offering your services, whether it's getting some additional professional development outside of your organization, doing different projects, finding ways to get more visibility. Like you have to become uncomfortable with it. And I think leaders like people who take some risks, like people who are willing to go the extra mile and also be okay with maybe making a couple of mistakes here and there, learning from them, and then getting better at things.
I believe that. I mean, I think growth mindset is the number one thing I recruit for, because the world is constantly changing, right? In business, someone who can look at what's happening now and in the future and what is needed now in the future and can learn something new or change the way we're doing business or change what we're doing, that's more valuable to me than someone who's going to keep doing the way they've done their work all the time. And so I think what you've described is someone who demonstrates their ability to grow and learn and take risks and change. That's like one of the number one leadership skills.
Yeah. Yeah. When you think about promotability, I mean, with the experience that you've had and that you currently have, what do you think are 3 things that make someone promotable?
Well, I will say number 1, growth mindset. I think that, that is who you want in your leaders. The second thing I would say is communication skills. That sounds weird, but it is the senior leaders that we call on to carry the messages, whether it's to carry the messages to the board, to external stakeholders, to inspire the troops. So you need leaders who can really communicate effectively and inspiringly. And so I think if someone's looking to get promoted and they feel that the communication skills aren't strong, that's something that they should absolutely work on. And the third thing is collaboration. There's no role in business that doesn't require working with other people. So even when you think of senior VPs or board members, they're collaborating with each other. They're not doing anything by themselves. So the ability to build high functioning, trusted, collaborative relationships and work with other people to achieve a goal, that's a leadership skill.
Yeah. Yeah. So growth mindset.
Great
communication skills and collaboration.
Yeah.
I love that. Absolutely. Well, let's take a little bit of a segue now and sort of move to what you're doing, because you've made a significant pivot in your own life from being in the corporate space to having your own very interesting podcast. I mean, I think that's how you and I met and came together. Can you tell our listeners about that? Because that was a pretty big pivot.
My children are launched. And so this was a moment where I was free to do what I wanted to do.
Ooh.
I mean, to tell the truth, sometimes you need these big jobs so you can pay for college or whatever.
I know all about it.
Right? And so I was at a moment where I was ready to do something on my own, ready to do something that gave back to the community, and wanted to work with my sister. So she and I launched the Body Wealth podcast a little bit over a year ago. And it's lifting up conversations with everyday Black women to inspire us all to live our healthiest lives. So each episode is us talking to someone about what they're doing for their health or what they have experienced and learned from in their health. And every episode, I've learned something that I want to do differently. And it's the work I'm supposed to be doing now.
That is awesome. Where can we get the podcast? Where can we listen to it?
Okay, so we're on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube. So just search Body Wealth Sisters on Instagram and Facebook. And we just launched season 3 on January 8th, 2025. Yeah. So new episodes every Wednesday from now through mid-April.
Awesome. What a fantastic way to start 2025. Brenda, I hope that you will be a friend of our podcast and come back and chat with us again. Appreciate all of the valuable information and tips that you've given myself and our listeners. Thank you so much for joining the Promoted with Denise Harris podcast.
It was really fun to talk to you anytime.
And to our listeners, thank you for listening. Please join, listen, subscribe, and leave us a review. We love having and hearing from you. Thank you so much.